My fruit cocktail dumb cake with cake mix recipe is easy and delicious. Made with a base of just 3 ingredients, along with some optional ones, this canned fruit cobbler is absolutely fantastic. Let's go over the ingredients. For a 9x13 baking dish, you will need 3 15-ounce cans of fruit cocktail in juice, not syrup, 1 drained and 2 with the juice, 1 15.25 ounce box of white cake mix, and 2 sticks of butter. I am using unsalted. Although that's all you really need to make this dessert, if you want to take it to the next level, I recommend adding a 1/4 cup of white sugar, as I measure 55 grams, a 1/4 cup of brown sugar, as I measure 60 grams, some spices, half a teaspoon of cinnamon, half a teaspoon of ginger, a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, and 1/8 of a teaspoon of cloves, a 1/4 teaspoon of almond extract, 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt, and 1.5 teaspoons of fresh lemon juice. My 9x13 baking dish is already buttered. I have all my ingredients. I'm ready to go. But before I get started, I'm going to put my butter back into the refrigerator. You'll see why in a few minutes. Hence the name of this recipe. The first step is literally just taking the cans of fruit cocktail and dumping them into the 9x13 baking dish. So that's what I'm going to start off doing. My fruit cocktail has peaches, pears, pineapple, grapes, and maraschino cherries. And like I said, it is canned in juice, not syrup. But you can definitely still make this recipe if your fruit cocktail is in syrup. I would just leave out the white sugar. If you're using cans of fruit cocktail and heavy syrup, leave out the white sugar entirely. If it's in light syrup, then just add 2 tablespoons of white sugar. Fruit cocktail can sometimes have little pieces of peach pits or pear stems. So what I would do is I would just look through the fruit now that it's in the baking dish. If you see any seeds or anything like that, peach pits, pear stems, just make sure you throw those out because you do not want to bite into something like that. These next ingredients are technically optional, but I highly recommend adding them to really take the flavor to the next level. So like I said, a 1/4 cup of white sugar. Normally, when I make dump cakes, I use canned fruit and syrup, but since this is in juice, I'm going to add a little bit of sugar to it. Now for some light brown sugar, a 1/4 cup. This is going to add a hint of molasses, and it's going to make the flavor more than just one-dimensional. It's going to add a sweetness that is more complex. The spices as well. Like I said, half a teaspoon of cinnamon, half a teaspoon of ginger, 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, and 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. Canned fruit does not have quite as much flavor as fresh does, so I do think it needs a little bit of help. That's why I'm adding the spices. Try to distribute them as evenly as possible, but I'm going to mix this later, so it's okay. I'm just going to add the almond extract to the lemon juice. Now sprinkle it over. The lemon juice is to help bring out the flavors because, like I said, this is canned fruit and it's not quite as flavorful, so a little bit of lemon juice is going to help make it taste a little bit fresher. Not too much because fruit cocktail is already acidic, and the little bit of almond extract is going to help bring out the cherry flavor because those two fruits are botanically related. I'm not using salted butter, so I'm just going to add 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt to the filling. It's not going to make it salty. It's just going to balance everything out. Now I'm just going to stir to combine. Doesn't have to be perfect, but just try to make it as evenly distributed as possible. Now that the fruit filling layer is mixed and evenly distributed, it's time to add the cake mix. So once again, hence the name of this recipe, I'm just going to dump it on top. So I'm going to take my cake mix and just going to shake the bag as I move it across the top. Like I said, this is white cake mix. I think yellow would be good as well. Maybe even spice cake mix. I could see lemon maybe working. But if you use a different type of cake mix besides white or yellow, please let me know in the comment section below how you thought it turned out. Now I'm going to take a fork and I'm just going to drag it across the top. This is to even out the cake mix and to break up any lumps along the way. Notice I'm not mixing, I'm not going like this. I'm literally just dragging my fork across the top to even out the cake mix. And like I said, break up any lumps. You don't have to be perfect, just try to do the best that you can. This is a homemade recipe. It's very forgiving. Now that the cake mix layer is smoothed out, it's time to start with the butter. This is definitely the most tedious and time-consuming part of this recipe, but it's arguably the most important. So here I have my sticks of butter. I have a sharp knife. And I'm just going to take my knife and cut the butter into small pats of butter and lay those on top of the cake mix. I would say each tablespoon of butter, I'm cutting into 4, maybe 5 pats of butter. And I'm not putting them so close that they touch, just almost touching, as you can see. And what this is going to do is that as the butter melts, it's going to melt down and out into the cake mix, and it's going to turn it into a crumble topping that is going to be very delicious. So you want to make sure that you get even distribution of this butter because it's what really makes the cake mix topping good. There are some people who melt the butter and then pour it over the top. You could do that, but I think you run the risk of accidentally pouring too much in one spot and not enough in another. Also, there are people who melt the butter and then put the cake mix into a bowl and then mix it that way and then just sprinkle it over the top. I think that would probably work. So if you give that a try, let me know how it turns out. But I always just do it this way because this is the way I've always done it. And if you read the comment section on my dump cake videos, everyone says that, oh, these turn out great. So I'm just going to keep doing it the way that it has been done because I've gotten good results. So I'm not going to make you watch me do this whole thing. So I'm going to do this while I'm preheating my oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. I just finished putting the butter across the top. I used almost all of the 2 sticks except 2 tablespoons. So you definitely are going to need a lot of butter to cover the top. You can see that wherever I felt like the pads of butter were a little too far apart, I just cut little pieces and put in the middle there. That's totally fine. One other thing I wanted to say is I have heard of people maybe freezing the butter or grating it on a cheese grater, then sprinkling it across the top. So that's an option, but like I said, I think just the good old-fashioned cutting it into slices and laying it across the top might just be the best way of doing it. Now I'm going to put my fruit cocktail dump cake into a 350 Fahrenheit degree oven uncovered. I'll let you know for how long. I just pulled my fruit cocktail dump cake with cake mix out of the oven. It was in at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, uncovered, for 1 hour, 60 minutes. It looks and smells fantastic. I can't wait to give it a try. As you can see, this dump cake looked like something out of a food magazine. The crumble topping was perfectly golden brown with bits of juice bubbling up here and there, exactly how a classic dump cake should look. I let it cool down for about 30 minutes and then I gave it a try. And when I cut the first slice and took the first bite, I knew that my fruit cocktail dump cake recipe was a big success because it was absolutely delicious. First of all, let's talk about the flavor. Unlike most other types of cobblers and dump cakes that just have one type of fruit, this one had a mix of peaches, pears, pineapple, grapes, and maraschino cherries, resulting in a rich fruit medley that combined all the flavors into one. If I had to be more specific, I'd say that the flavor was dominated by peaches and pears, but with more acidity in the background than what you would normally expect. But like I said, I felt like everything really just came together into a unifying flavor. Speaking of the acidity from not only the lemon juice, but also from the fruit cocktail juice itself, not only brought out the flavors, but also balanced out the sweetness. Dump cakes can sometimes be on the sweet side because they're made not only with pie filling or canned fruit, but also with cake mix that already has sugar in it. But in this particular one, the extra tartness balanced out the sweetness, giving it an unexpected yet welcome sweet and tart flavor contrast. In fact, I like the extra acidity in this a lot more than I thought that I was going to. So even though I've made a lot of dump cakes here on my channel, I think that this fruit cocktail one was definitely one of my favorites because, like I said, that extra tartness in the background not only brought out the flavors but also toned down the sweetness. The light brown sugar and spices played subtle yet important roles as well, giving this dessert a depth of flavor that you wouldn't get if you just used the 3 basic ingredients. And as with the other dump cake fruit cobblers that I've made here on my channel, the cake mix topping turned into a crispy crumble, the strong butter flavor helping to balance out the tartness in the juice absolutely perfectly. And speaking of the crumble topping, the texture of this dessert was just as good as the flavor. The crispy topping contrasted nicely with the softer, juicy bottom, the chunks of fruit being fully softened, so they enhanced the texture contrast between the bottom and the top. I think that using 3 15-ounce cans of fruit cocktail, but draining one was the perfect call because this dump cake had just enough moisture to make the bottom soft and a little bit juicy without making the dump cake overly moist and preventing the top from crisping up. As I'm sure you can tell, I was very pleased with how this old-fashioned fruit cocktail dump cake with cake mix recipe turned out. It far exceeded my expectations, so this is definitely one you need to try. However, there are still a few things I would like to point out. First, like I already said, this particular dump cake has more acidity than the others. It's not necessarily something that's bad. I think it's actually something that's good, but it is something you should be aware of since the flavor profile is a little bit different from what's normal. Also, like I already said, draining one of the cans is critical for getting a crispy golden top. If you want it to be even crispier, you probably could drain 2 of the cans, but I personally would not drain all 3 because I think it would turn out kind of dry, so just keep that in mind. And finally, I know it is kind of time consuming, but slicing the butter into thin pads and then laying them across the top is how I've always made my dump cakes, And as you can see, they always turn out great. I've had subscribers tell me that doing it that way takes longer, but they get a better result. So that's personally how I would do the butter layer. If you try it a different way and you're pleased with the results, let me know in the comment section below. But like I said, taking a little bit of extra time has never failed me, so that's what I'm probably going to keep doing. But just to sum it up, this easy Southern style fruit cocktail dump cake was a hit. It would be perfect for a holiday like Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, Mother's Day, a Sunday dinner, or just because. If you're looking for something unique, this is one you need to try. As always, thanks for watching. See you next time.